So these Taipaiwonkas are the spirits of Wampanoags who have died, specifically been killed by the Pukwudgies. And so they lure them. There's these ghost lights. They lure them in. I've seen them actually a few different times myself. And they brought them to this place called the Assonet Ledge, and then they would push them off the Assonet Ledge and kill them. And then they would then become Taipaiwonkas that they would use later, right? And this place, the Assonet Ledge, is one of the most haunted place I've ever been to. And there's always activity. This is in Massachusetts, Freetown, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And people see these lights there all the time, and they're talking about it, and they see, and I've had a detective and other police people talk about how many dead bodies there are in this woods. It's a dump spot because it's an hour away from Boston. It's an hour away from Providence, Rhode Island. People commit crimes, and then they bring it to Freetown and dump the bodies in Freetown. So this detective I talked to should have had a boring life, right? And instead, he investigated like over 30 homicides in his career because there were always dead bodies coming up in the woods.
Oh, shit.
Hi, everyone.
Well, hello.
I'm Lauren.
I am Ken.
And this is Paradise After Dark. Paradise After Dark is a bi-weekly podcast covering true crime,
unsolved mysteries,
missing people,
urban legends, and the dark side of the Sunshine State.
But first, if you'd like to support the show, please subscribe to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Paradise After Dark podcast.
On Patreon, you'll have access to bonus episodes, our spin-off show, Vacation Edition, discounts on merchandise, and much, much more.
If you have a question, a Florida case suggestion, or you just like to chat, please email us at paradiseafterdarkpodcast@gmail.com.
We want to take this time real quick before we get started here, and we'll have Lauren introduce our new guest to thank all of our Patreons for your support. We really appreciate
Patrons, not Patreon.
I was getting there.
Okay.
I was going to say, oops, I meant patrons, but I always make that mistake. So anyway, but thank you guys. We really appreciate all the support.
Yes, thank you.
So, and don't forget, we got CrimeCon coming up.
CrimeCon UK and CrimeCon Austin.
CrimeCon Austin. We're not there yet, but stay tuned.
Paradise 21 will get you 10% off to either event.
So, Lauren,
we've got a special guest in here with us tonight.
Wait.
You heard that weird voice, coming in. You heard who is that guy and what he's talking about? What Pukwudgies and what else were you
and everybody's going
about?
like, what the hell?
Everybody's like, what?
Did they mess up? What's is Ken editing?
So, happy Halloween week,
yes,
everyone. We have Christopher Balzano with us tonight. Christopher is an author, a folklorist.
Analytical folklorist.
I'm sorry. A former paranormal investigator.
I could like to say reformed paranormal
paranormal investigator. A teacher, and so much more.
Probably even a former hockky player being from Massachusetts.
He's a jack of all trades.
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. Did you play hockey?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No.
Okay, just...
No.
I'm just saying, because everybody from up there seems to play hockey.
He's from Boston.
I'll tell you the story really quick if you promise not to put this part in.
Oh, no, you say it into that microphone.
Okay, so I'm going to imagine, let's take the step that my father was not going to listen to this.
Okay.
Because every time I insult my father or say something bad about it, it's the one episode of my show he listens to, and I get in trouble. So my father was a great hockey player, and he actually went to Northeastern University on a hockey scholarship, which is a big deal. If you're from Boston, there's a huge tournament called the Bean Pot every year, and Northeastern is one of the schools. And then he was recruited out of Northeastern by Pinkertons. So I'm sure you guys are true crime, you know Pinkertons. And so you would think that his son, his name bearer, would have learned to play hockey. And he never taught me. And it's always a real sore spot because after Massachusetts, I lived in New Hampshire. And if you can't skate backwards in New Hampshire by the age of 18 months, you're never going to play hockey. It's just that advanced. And so I never learned to play hockey. Now, if you ask my dad, he'll say, because every time he took me to the rink, he would say, okay, so when we're finished, we're going to have hot chocolate. And I just wanted the hot chocolate. And so I would intentionally not skate just so that I could get the hot chocolate. Right. That's his version of the story. And so I never learned to play. And so it was always, being a chubby gentleman and a chubby child, it would be, okay, we'll just put him in goal. And so whenever my friends would be playing hockey, they would just kind of throw me in goal with no skates. And so I never actually learned to play hockey. It's a little bit of a sore spot.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Well,
no, it's okay.
It's funny.
This is off to a great start.
I had no idea about that.
Want to talk about my divorce next? Or?
No, because I don't talk about mine either. But no, it cracked me up because I just threw that out there for fun because it seems like everyone from New England plays hockey. And
I am the one person that I know that does not play hockey.
You might be the only one I know too.
So,
oh goodness. So happy Halloweeny, everyone, and that's going to be a great start to this show. I'm loving it already.
We invited Chris on the show because he just released a brand new book.
Another book. He's written several. How many books have you written?
This is my 8th. I call it my 9th because one book went into like a special edition. So to pad my stats, I say, there was 9 of them, but there's 8 actual titles.
Gotcha.
Okay. So he just released a book and he sent it to us a few weeks ago. It's called Haunted Love Stories. And we figured that'd be a really good thing to talk about. We're getting close to Halloween. And who loves some haunted love stories?
I know. And there's the one in there that just a quick, and we can discuss whatever one you want, but we talked about it when we had you here before, was the Bloody Bucket Bridge. So I reread that one.
Okay.
And I think it was the Bridge Love at the... What's the I can't think of the title of it. I read it. Love.
You're going to kill me with the titles of the chapters because I always come up with something that's too witty that I can't remember after it.
It's Love at the Bridge or something like that. But I read that and I'm like, this is my story because I actually, one of the things that we talked about in the podcast early on was we were going to do when she was doing
the love potion.
Yes.
Okay. Because there's two.
No.
Those are two. No. There's the Bloody Bucket Bridge and then there's the Arbuckle Creek Bridge.
I read that one because I read it again because we had talked about it before and it really interested me because I actually pulled it up and had it on my list of things that I wanted to do, for the podcast itself. Yeah. And so we talked about it when you were here last time. We kind of skimmed over it, but I really enjoyed that story. And then I read it again, and then you go into a little more detail of what it is.
This is the story of Ludmilla, who is killing the children,
exactly, and throwing her over the bridge. And that, it tells the great story. But the one thing I like that you do is you don't just go with what's there. Then you give the extras. Mm-hmm. So it isn't just like, all right, this is it, and this is all you're getting. This is the story. It's all the stuff that you put around it. So then that allows someone to sort of create their own idea. And I think, is that kind of what a folklorist
I think so, yeah. So I've sometimes been accused of not being spooky enough or not being scary enough in my books. And this one is really, I love this book.
That's kind of spooky.
Because it's a story that has been told in the town, and I can only really trace the story itself back 15 years. And I can't find evidence of it being told before then. And yet now people know it, and it's appeared in books, and it's in Weird Florida, and Mark Muncy has covered it in some of his books. And I became kind of obsessed with the idea of where does it come from? Why does it only appear after a certain point? And so I felt there was no way to tell the story of the Bloody Bucket Bridge without getting into, now, where did it come from? Why are people telling the story? Because it's a story that is not true. The haunting is true. If you go to Bloody Bucket Bridge in Wauchula, Florida, you hear the sounds of children crying. You hear this unexplained splash. You hear cries.
Physically heard these?
None of it. I've physically heard none of it.
Okay.
And some of that can be explained. Like I have whole episodes where we talk about the idea of a crybaby bridge and the fact that what sounds like kids is actually the water going over rocks.
And that's what got me in your book.
And
it's that type of explanation that I really enjoyed.
And guess what? Those splashes in the water that people are hearing are alligators.
Yeah, I guess it could be.
And so
well, that's Florida for you.
Yeah,
right. And so a lot of these ghost stories end up being either warnings for alligators or involving alligators in some kind. So it is a very Florida book. It is haunted Florida love story. So it is centric to that. So what I found out, which is I think part of the story, is that the road itself is called Bloody Bucket Road informally, and it's called Bloody Bucket Bridge. And Charlie Carlson, I might be getting the name wrong, who wrote Weird Florida, has all of these reports in there and people who said they've had experiences. And so you have to take that as credit. And I've heard, I mentioned Mark Muncy, he's another writer in Florida, has seen some of Charlie, who's now dead. He's seen some of his documentation, right? So from interviews and seen some of his notes, you have to take it that those people had an experience and those people shared it with him and so on. But the backstory is totally made up, because I was able to find a blog in 2003 where someone says, hey guys, it's a Halloween blog. I'm going to tell you guys another ghost story. You guys enjoyed the first 2 ghost stories I told this week, so here's a third one. And this is why they call it Bloody Bucket Road. You guys all know Bloody Bucket Road. Here's my fictional story about why it's called Bloody Bucket Road.
Wow.
And she lays out the entire story that has been repeated now for 15 years. And she says at the beginning, this is a fictional story. In the notes, like in the comments, because I always read the comments when I go on to these places, because that's the best place. That's where you get a lot of the good meat. Someone says, you did a really good job. Thank you. I'm thinking about writing fiction and maybe publishing a book on fiction. So here's the story, because it's fiction.
Yeah.
So it's right there. And yet people have now attached that story to that bridge and to those experiences.
Well, see, like I just said, I actually have it on my notes to look up so we could talk about it under our Urban Legends section. But then we had you here last time. I think we spoke about it just quick, like I said, quickly. But it was like, wow, because but there it was. I found it. I saw it. I wanted to research it, and because it was something that because I fished like at Istapoga, which one of the things in there that got me was.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for pronouncing it the right way.
Well, because I fished there all the time.
Okay.
I've been fishing there.
Okay, so I'm going to point at you when I want to talk about it. It's
Lake
like,
Istapoga.
Lake.
Yeah,
And
Istapoga.
I'll just point to you for it.
Well, we got guys the guys I fish with, they always say, they always call it Istapoga. It's not Istapoga. It's Iskapoga. That's how it's called. Iskapoga. It's Istapoga.
And Istapoga is actually, what was it?
It's a Seminole
word for lake where people died.
Yeah, that's on one of the other stories we'll get into.
I learned that from your book. I did not know that. I learned that from your book.
I've been casting in that lake for over 25 years.
And you never heard of what the name was?
Never heard of what the name was for.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's one of the things that I enjoy about reading that book is that you learn little things. Yeah. And especially because we're Florida people and what we do is Florida. So you learn about Florida. And even if, even people that listen to us that are not in Florida, these stories come from Florida, but everybody wants to be in Florida. Have I said Florida enough?
And what you find is that these stories, every single story that's in there, you can find in pretty much every single state.
Yeah.
And you can extend that to find in every single country. It's just the backstory is so universal that it gets stuck to the haunting, right? And it's got a Florida twist to it. So it's got the alligator as part of the story, or it takes place in the swamp as opposed to Hangman's Road down the. So these are the hauntings and the locations that are in this book are Florida, right? And a lot of the story has to do with being in Florida or something that has to do with the state, but the themes and a lot of the action of the backstory could happen anywhere.
Yeah. Well, now your first book that you have, is it Florida based or is that?
This is my first Florida book.
Okay, this is your first one. The first one that you did, the last one you told us that you were going to send us. That's sort of nationwide, right?
No, that is specifically about a town in Massachusetts called Freetown.
Okay, Freetown. That's right. That's okay. I misunderstood.
Yeah. So two of my
we
books,
were talking off mic. Sorry.
Two of my books are about specifically Freetown, Massachusetts, and an area of Massachusetts known as the Bridgewater Triangle, which is now a pretty famous location.
Which we won't make you talk about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But we can talk. I would love to hear about the Tampa Triangle.
We'll get into that.
I've never heard of that.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
And then I've got 3 books that are more all areas in the United States.
Exactly. And your YouTube channel is Tripping on Legends, right?
Tripping on Legends.
Yeah.
The name of the show is Tripping on Legends.
Not your channel, but that's the name of the show.
Your podcast is Tripping on Legends.
Yeah. That's it.
No,
If you what?
Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do, but I get no traction on my YouTube.
Neither do we.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, because I've seen the videos, I've seen links, I've watched his videos.
So the majority of my videos link back to the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Most of your
Because
videos,
I
have been
was
that's where I get
watching
much more
your
traction.
Facebook Live the other night when you had the little bat cookies and then you had the Italian wedding soup and you had all this Mothman themed food and I was like, oh man, I'm hungry.
When I have my kids on a Saturday, so I'm a single father and I have them 50% of the time. And so I usually have them every other weekend. And we have a movie theme night. And so we pick a movie that we're going to watch. And then I design food around it.
Oh my God.
Because that's kind of in my history.
That is
like
amazing.
I've worked for caterers. I worked at restaurants before I became a teacher.
I love that idea.
And so this was Mothman because my daughter's obsessed with Mothman. We've done E.T., we did Poltergeist, we've done Red Dawn. Like usually it's an 80s movie. And so this was Mothman because she's obsessed with it. So I was like, well, what am I going to make for Mothman? And so we made those cookies and so that they were looking like it.
I love it.
Soup was actually leek and kale because of the people who are actually part of the case. One of them is named Kale and the other one is named John Lake. I can't remember his name. People are going to kill me if they're Mothman fans. John Keel. So no, it's John Keel and Alexander Leek. And so I was like, I'll make a kale soup, man. Like that's a good soup. And so we always design food that is around it.
That's a great Halloween thing.
Yeah, it is.
Or just anything. That's a great idea. Great concept.
And it's, I have Tripping on Legends and I do Tripping on Legends with kids. And the idea of it is, like you were saying, so when you say, ooh, it was scary, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. When you say, I learned something, that's what really thrills me because as a folklorist, this is about history, right? So this is the history of Florida. If you've read the book, no one, I speak at libraries and places all across the state, no one knows about, for example, the Royal Air Force and that the Royal Air Force trained in Florida. They trained in Arcadia, Florida. And died on our soil, right? So British pilots, they obviously couldn't train while there's a war going on, so they were shipped over here and they would train in Florida. People don't know that.
Wow, I didn't know that.
How do you know it? How will they learn it? Because I tell a ghost story about it. Yeah. So I do Tripping on Legends with kids, and I teach my kids the history of Florida. I teach them how to interview people, how to do research, things like that. So it's not just a spooky little thing I do. I actually incorporate the kids into what I do. And then if you've watched my Facebook Lives, half of them are with my daughter because, I do it every single Tuesday night at 8:30. Well, half the time I have my kids.
Yeah.
And so she's like, she rolls right on up. She wants to be my co-host.
Yeah.
And usually I try to save like some kind of episode that's going to connect to something that she's doing. So like we did a Disney one a few weeks ago and things like that where I know, I can kind of teach her and teach the audience at the same time.
The one thing you said Disney, and we won't ask Lauren about Disney. We'll just leave that alone. But as far as like the Disney, when you said it, there's no folklore thing, but how the concept of how they bought all the property to make Disney blows me away. And I heard a podcast talking about it and how they designed all these different shell companies to buy the property.
It's the sketchiest deal in history, right?
And exactly, he was buying the shit. He would buy like 100 acres for $50.
Yeah.
And then people didn't know until the last piece he sold for like $50,000, the last acre, $50,000 an acre, because the guy's like, hey, wait a minute.
All of a sudden they started jacking up
what's
the
going
prices.
on here?
Right.
Well, because he was not a dumb businessman. But then if you walk into Disney, they got the business name, the names of all the businesses on the top. Is all the shell companies.
It really is.
I did not know that.
And you can listen to my episode if you want to get more details on this, not to take away from your episode.
No, not ours personally.
But then, right. But then when you start getting into it, Walt Disney had a serious, almost addiction to the occult, and symbolism and numbers and numerology and all that stuff exists, and so it becomes this very fertile ground for legends because there is this. Wait a minute, if you notice that, and you see it in the movies too, like the appearance of certain numbers and certain figures, and the fact that every movie has the Mickey ears somewhere in it hidden.
And there's a penis on the castle. And the Little Mermaid.
We won't talk about those other kinds of things. But
I've seen it though.
No, I'm with you.
It's
But
there.
there's a whole other thing we can talk about off mic with that, off camera. But then there's also this. Mystique about the place, and this kind of weird giant corporation aspect when you hear something like that George died while building Pirates of the Caribbean, it makes sense to, because they'll cover anything up. It's such a huge entity that, why do people never die at Disney? Right? That's the legend. That's one of the urban legends, that no one ever dies on the property of Disney. Well, part of that's because it's such a huge thing that things get covered up.
Yeah.
And things get so it makes sense that there would be people, the spirits of people might be left behind on certain rides, and we'll never know the real whole story of that because
it's Disney.
You can't stop Disney.
Yeah, you ain't stopping Disney.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, they might ban this episode now.
Yeah.
So because
they might want us to pay them royalties just for using our name.
I know.
But I know that in the 70s when they were starting to build it, a lot of people thought that this was going to be an underground bunker or like nuclear. They thought it was going to be nuclear freaking lofts.
Yeah.
So there's so much stuff behind it. And of course, I'm sure that in that swamp area, there had to have been people that died trying to build Disney.
It's impossible that it would. And if you're there, my ex-wife worked for them. She was a cast member.
Did they have underground? Is it real?
It's underground.
They have a whole underground.
That's why it seems as if the characters appear out of nowhere. Is that it's actually
because technically
there are
they
these
do.
entrances, and the whole thing is built kind of in an angle, and so you're designed to walk a certain way. It is the ultimate form of programming because no one goes to Disney and goes left. Right? There's this like peel because it actually slopes downhill. And there's all these little things like that have to do with it. And part of it is, these entrances and exits that seem to come out of nowhere because part of it's underground.
Yeah. I like that. So that's pretty cool. See, we're learning all kinds of stuff here.
I'm here to teach.
Tell me something scary. Tell me something creepy. Tell me a scary story. Well, tell our listeners a scary story.
What kind of scary story do you want to hear? Because I've got.
Well, hold on. Yeah. And I don't know if we covered this before, and I don't want to get into why. I mean, I kind of have an idea of why, but you might even know this. Can you give me? It has to go back to a childhood haunting for me.
Yeah.
Black-eyed kids.
Yeah.
What is it about black-eyed kids that would...
Holy shit.
What?
Did you just open to the black-eyed kids section?
No.
Okay.
What is it about black-eyed kids?
You have no idea how huge this is that he's asking this question.
What makes them, to me, I mean, what if you know anything? Obviously, I'm not saying...
I can talk theory.
What's your theory on black-eyed kids? Because this was sort of a haunting when I was a kid, and I kind of came face-to-face with two black-eyed kids.
Tell me your story first.
Well, I'm not going to get into the whole story. But I came into contact with two black-eyed kids.
I have no idea what this. He refuses to tell me it.
Okay, well, I'm not going to get into the whole story.
He refuses to even talk about it, which is why I'm like.
Well, I have one dream that continuously happens, and even as an adult, I'm 40. I just turned 45, and I have within the last 6 months had a dream of me being stuck in this tree around the corner of this house, on my big wheel, even as an adult, constantly. It's not a dream. The dream does not change. So this dream is the same dream, but I don't dream it all the time.
So does it feel more like a memory than a dream?
No, because I don't ever remember being on that big wheel on that road in the tree. I'm stuck in a tree on this big wheel in front of this house. And in this house contains two black-eyed kids that I see in this dream. And it's like, and black-eyed kids, I don't know where they come from or what the theory is. Yeah. So do you have a theory on black-eyed kids? They're scary
I do. Yeah, no, they are. And I'm probably a firm believer. I'm firmly in the camp that black-eyed kids are, let's say, elementals. So we leave out the religious connotations of a word like demon.
Yeah.
And they are specifically designed and presented to lure you in, to seduce you. I think that they are not kids at all. But they manifest as kids in a seductive kind of way.
Well, because kids are more approachable.
Because if a kid appears at the real stories behind most of the stories involving black-eyed kids involve them asking to come into your house.
Yes.
Right? They want entrance into something, which is a classic demonic possession thing, right? You can't be possessed without saying, yes, I allow you to possess. You can be infested, you can have experiences, but they cannot possess you unless you say, yes, you may possess me.
Kind of like
unless
a vampire.
You invite them in.
Exactly.
Well, how did the girl in The Exorcist get possessed?
Well, that's not. I mean, the boy in the real case of The Exorcist.
Well, that's kind of what I.
Yeah, meant. It was invited in, just like that kind of communication allowed it. You know what I'm saying? So at some point, what happens in a lot of cases is that seduction leads into what you think is just inviting something in. Like, yes, you can use my body to talk. Or, people who use Ouija boards a lot, right? The part that people don't talk about Ouija boards are the corners that are the channeling corners. And when you start to get a spirit on a Ouija board, for example, that starts going into the corners where the channeling is, now you have to be concerned, right? So the concept of a Ouija board is you're talking, something's moving. It might be moving your hand. It might be actually physically moving the planchette, but there's a separation, right? You are being, and maybe even your hands are being used as a tool. When you channel, you are saying, yes, you may speak through me, right? So if you think of like Ghost, when the ghost goes into Whoopi Goldberg, that's channeling. And so you are inviting in. So using the Ouija board, for example, in that case, was a way of allowing and giving permission, right? So if you've ever seen, Haunting in Connecticut.
Yes, I've seen that.
I've never seen the actual movie, The Haunting in Connecticut, but I've watched The Haunting, which used to be a TV show, which was inspired by this mockumentary, I guess you could call it, called Haunting in Connecticut, which is based on a book called, I think it's a Warm, Dark Place or something like that. Scariest book I ever read. Literally could not read it at night. It was that scary for me.
What's it called?
I think it's called a Warm, Dark Place. But it's the book that A Haunting in Connecticut is based on.
See, something that I really don't like to talk about, I don't like to think about is like the demonic. Mm-hmm. I just...
Elemental?
No, yeah. Yeah, because like I said, there is religious connotations to it. So the idea of that is, that what happens in that story is that they torment the family so much that the child, the teenager, says, stop tormenting everybody, I'll let you in. I'll let you in if you stop doing everything else. So what happens with a lot of those cases is that either they willingly do it because they want that in their lives, or it's presented as something different, or everything else is like, okay, I just want the infestation to stop. So yes, it's fine. Like, just talk to me once and that'll be fun. It's never just once.
Yeah, exactly.
So Black-Eyed Kids, I feel, are the same kind of idea. Like, they're always trying to get in something. Or they often show up in locations. I'm working on a few Black-Eyed Kid cases with the book that I'm working on right now, where it seems like some kind of tragedy happened there and something else is using the body of these children. And that's why there's the darkness, there's the emptiness of the eyes.
And see, that's the one thing I fear the most.
Are these live children or just manifestations?
Yep, manifestations.
Well, see, and that's one of the things, that because a child does have that, especially like for an adult, a father, a mother, when you see a child like that, because you have your own children, it does open you up to like, you want to help, you want to be the parental figure. But I was a kid, and now as an adult, it's still, because what happens in this dream is I go back to being that same kid that I was. Mm-hmm. So now I'm the same kid, in the same situation, the same house, on the same big wheel, on the same goddamn tree. And I can't get out of this tree, no matter what I do. You know what I mean? There's dogs barking. I'm not going to sit and paint the whole picture. But that's one of the things that I fear the most, these goddamn black-eyed kids. And I don't know why, but every time she'll tell you, if there's something like we put on TV, change it. Change it.
And so what happens is, a lot of times people will tell a story about a location that's haunted, and it'll involve kids. And because it involves kids, in their mind, they'll see them as black-eyed kids.
Okay.
So sometimes I think just the idea that it's a haunted location, something weird has happened, when people think back upon it, they put this whole moniker of black-eyed kids onto them. So, a really good example of that would be if you've ever seen the movie Jeepers Creepers.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm in the new book, I'm talking about Tiger Trail Road, which is where the movie was shot. And it's now famously haunted. And one of the things that is on that street are these black-eyed kids. And people have seen them in their car, seen them on the road itself, as well as a few other things. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that kind of goes against what black-eyed kids are. And so I really feel, honestly, it's one of those things where people tell a story, and then as the story goes on, all of a sudden that
it manifests into black-eyed kids.
All of a sudden it becomes black-eyed kids, because which is all of what the book is about, right? We experience the paranormal, and it's abnormal for us. And so we don't know how to process it, right? We don't know how to understand what we just experienced. And so if someone can say to you, oh, well, you know why that is? Because there was a suicide there about these two people who loved each other and they couldn't be together, so they decided to kill themselves on that bridge. Wait a minute, I know that's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. The story makes sense to us, and so it helps us understand what the activity is. So almost all of the time, I believe in that book, there's paranormal activity at that location, but the backstory is completely made up because it's a story we can understand, and so it sticks, right? Like just how every theater is haunted, right? Are you telling me literally every theater in the country had someone commit suicide because they couldn't get apart? No, but that story exists in every single theater because it makes sense to us. So what story makes more sense to us than a love story, right? I mean, if we're talking about it was this, there was a weird thing that happened. That doesn't make sense to me. Oh, well, it was a mother constantly coming back to find her children. That makes sense.
Oh, so the lore is there.
To that.
It's just what story can we put with it?
Exactly. The activity is there. And so I think one of the things that happens, and now I'm seeing this in the Ocala National Forest, which is what my new book is about, that everything that is popular in the paranormal now becomes part of the story. So Black-Eyed Kids becoming very popular. Now all of a sudden every kid in a ghost story is a Black-Eyed Kid because they're popular. They're where it's known. It makes sense to us. I've seen movies about that. Now that doesn't explain your experience.
My
right?
situation started back when I was about 12.
Right.
So 11, 12 years
old.
So
it does explain everything. But when you hear a story, so, for example, the idea of dark figures like shadow men, right, is a fairly new, popular idea in the paranormal. So
I've been following shadow people probably for 15 years. Yep. It's something that I've looked into.
That was one of the ghost stories we did in years past. Our Halloween episode, we talked about the shadow person we saw.
Yeah,
but he was running, and we seen him both.
Together. Oh, they're not fake. They're not fake at all.
No, but before that, I'm talking going back before I ever even met Ken. I've experienced shadow people, and once
I've always been in her life.
What?
Nothing. Go ahead.
No, once you experience something, you start to look into it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, when you say something is new, do you mean like in the last...
Newly popular.
Newly popular.
So that doesn't mean that what you experienced... So you're saying 15 years, 19 years ago. No, not 20 years ago. I was getting reports from my students. So at that time, I was working at a jail. Or it was a step-down program from a jail. So these were juvenile criminal offenders. And not like, oh, they were talking in class. I'm talking, child molesters, gangbangers, like, murderers even. Hard kids, most of them hard kids. And this was the program that they had to go through before they were released. So they've been through their jail time, and this was a step-down program. And so I worked there for about 5 years. And over the course of the 5 years, I probably took 20, 25 interviews of kids about seeing shadow people in one specific location.
In the jail?
In this jail. And not mine, in another jail, a secure lockup called Taunton State. And these were kids over the course of...
State.
Okay, it's part of the Bridgewater Triangle and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so these are kids who didn't know each other, over the course... You're talking 5 years, so that's, criminals that we would cycle in and out like a year. They would be in our program. So these are kids that didn't know each other. They would report the same dark figure standing in the corner, watching them as they slept. Never anything bad happening, but just pure fear coming from them. Well, they weren't influenced by the media. They weren't influenced by anything else. They were just having their experience. As a matter of fact, most of them described it initially as venom because they were, venom was really popular in the comics back then and in the video games. And then I would talk to them more and I would get a description of what we would traditionally call a shadow person, right? But they would initially say venom. It was like venom. It was like venom. And that Taunton State, where was the foundation from? The rocks that were in the Freetown State Forest.
Full circle.
Right. So, and that's kind of when I made that connection, I was like taken aback, like, oh my God, like the foundation where all these bad things were happening and these rituals were being conducted on mental patients decades before my students were there. They were being conducted in the basement where these rocks came from Freetown, which is also a huge hotspot of cult activity. So they're real. They're 100% real. but they're
Massachusetts is weird anyway.
It really is.
When it
Not
comes
as
to
weird
shit.
as Florida, but
Well, I mean, well, no,
I don't think any places
can
as
we say
weird as
Salem
Florida.
witch trials?
right, which actually didn't take place in Salem, but yes.
Well, it sounds
but
good,
that whole
Chris.
town is it's crazy, right? So, but my point being is that when a shadow person then becomes, or a black-eyed kid becomes a new character in legend. So, in the course of covering the Tiger Trail haunting, which I've now looked at for about 3 years, a really popular TikTok, especially, but also like little short movies theme is this idea. I did an episode called "They Come Closer and Closer" a few weeks ago. This idea of the lights go out and then the figure is closer to you, and then the lights go out and the figure is closer to you again.
Oh, I've seen
And the
those.
lights, right?
I've seen
'Cause
those
they're-
videos.
right? And they're easy to make. My daughter makes them all the time. Well, and then the door shuts, and then all of a sudden the dark figure is there. That concept has now been put onto that legend. So when I first started talking about it and doing the research into it, there were no references to you shut your lights off and then you turn your lights on and the dark figure comes closer, and then you shut it off and the dark figure comes closer. And then if you don't do it the right way, he'll follow you home. That story didn't exist. All of a sudden that idea becomes popular, and now it's part of the story. So if you look at the initial haunted stories, it didn't involve black-eyed kids at all. But since they became such a hot topic in the paranormal, because people are really experiencing them, those black-eyed kids start to walk onto every haunted set across the country.
Phew. Yeah, well, that scares the shit out of me. Well, thanks for clearing that up, because I mean, honestly, it's one of those. It's like, to me, that dream that I have, and that's the worst part for me, because that dream is continuous. It's like, but the worst part is it does not change. So when I dream that, I wake up and I'm like, shit. I did it. You had it again. But it's like,
and so, and of course, the theme of that is the eyes are the gateway to the soul. So if the eyes are black, where's the soul?
Yeah.
And that's the really scary part. And so I would suggest to you, if you have that dream again, get off of that tree and tell those kids to get the hell out of your neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? And you'll find some, one of the things, and this has been in folklore all the time, is this idea of the devil inserting himself. Devil went down to Georgia, or the devil challenges someone to something, or the devil appears at the dance hall, right? And dancing, and he's absolutely handsome, and this woman is totally getting into it. This handsome guy is showing her attention, and then she notices his feet are hooves. And as soon as she notices that and says, like, what's wrong with your feet? He disappears. So if you look at, like, all throughout different folklores of different countries, this idea that they are human looking, but there's one thing that's wrong with them. Right?
unlike Lucifer.
Right. And all of these stories, if you call them out on it, they go away. So what I want you to do is next time when you have that dream, go right off that tree. Don't be scared to, because man, they can't hurt you, right? Go down off that tree, look at them, go like, no, you're not allowed in my neighborhood. Your eyes are fucked up. And send them off. Can I say that, the F word?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. There you go.
Yeah,
You
we're
can say
ready.
that.
And you'd be surprised how often that'll dissipate. And at the very least, you've empowered yourself in your own dream. And so it'll stop haunting you.
Interesting. I'm going to try
Now
it next
you have
time.
to owe me $1.
But I'm gonna tell you what.
$100 for the
I'm going to tell you
counseling
what,
session
though.
on that.
If I come down off that tree and I get my ass whooped by some black-eyed kids,
Come call me.
I'm calling you.
But real quick, can I just insert some?
Okay, yeah, please. Then when I want to talk about there's something about Mary. Go ahead.
You want to talk about Franks and Beans?
Oh, Jesus. No. No, we want to talk about the book.
Oh.
Anyway, go
We
ahead.
haven't even gotten to the book yet.
Oh, yeah, there's a book involved in this, isn't
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
What's your question?
It is so strange because you are the person that has told me several times in the last, 6-8 months, follow the signs, follow the signs.
Hashtag follow the signs.
So I literally was having a conversation with a mutual friend of ours who's a psychic medium. And I was having a text conversation. And she literally said to me, in the movie Ghost, when Whoopi Goldberg realizes that she actually really has a gift, and there's this waiting room of all these ghosts, and then you just made a reference to ghosts, and I got goosebumps right now.
Yeah.
Based on what her and I were discussing, I don't know. I feel like
And I think we need to just take a moment and give out our prayers and thoughts
Yes.
and our good vibes to our
Yes.
mutual friend.
To our mutual friend.
Ditto.
I don't want
Oh, that's the Whoopi Goldberg thing when she said it.
I'm
Ditto.
not going
That's
to
how
put
she convinced her. It was,
anybody's
I'm talking to
business
her.
out there, but
Yeah.
yes,
But
you
we
know
can do
who
it
you
silently,
are, and
so.
you know we are thinking of you, and you know we're praying for you. So that's that.
Okay, so Bricks and beans. We were fishing. I went fishing over the weekend, last weekend, and that show was on in the camper that we all stayed in, and I had to laugh my ass off because my wife.
Were you on your way to Lake Istapoga?
Yeah. We weren't going to Istapoga. It was fishing out of Clewiston. Well, which, by the way, has a very, 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 very haunted hotel.
Yes.
And it's right there on the main drag. The Clewiston Inn, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very haunted, and people actually go there to try.
Have you stayed there?
No, hell no. I stay in our house. That's enough as far as haunting. But that was on there. So interesting. One of the interesting chapters in your book. Mm-hmm. It's called "Mary in the Dorm."
Yeah,
and I didn't know. I mean, I know like in Florida, I know about Ford. I know about Edison. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that there was such a connection.
Oh my word! Yeah,
to the circus.
Yeah. Ringling, especially on the West Coast.
I did know there was a lot of circus.
Of course, I'm originally from Indiana, but I moved here when I was.
Where in Indiana?
Franklin, little town south of Indianapolis.
Okay, so do you know Anderson?
Anderson, Indiana.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's the huge Pukwudgie. That is the second largest, and some would say the biggest Pukwudgie.
No kidding.
Area of the world.
Wow. Yeah. I had no idea. I thought that was all in the New England area.
Nope. As a matter of fact, I know we're totally off topic now, but my goal was to get to Anderson. So Tripping on Legends, our first road trip, was up the coast. We did a whole bunch of stuff in North Carolina, shot over to West Virginia so we could hit Point Pleasant and Mothman. And then my goal was to get to Anderson. And Natalie, who's my original co-host, who just happened to, her parents live in New Israel or something like New Bethlehem or something like that. But we wanted to get to Anderson, and it totally cracked the code of the Pukwudgies. And my Pukwudgie experience actually happened in Anderson.
Wow.
And so it is the largest, I would say probably even more than Massachusetts, because they've actually been writing about Pukwudgies for years and using the word Pukwudgie openly. And what I discovered when I was there is that Pukwudgie was a term for, like kind of an umbrella term for monsters. Right?
Okay.
For little people. I mean, it's an Algonquin word, but because all these different tribes from all across the country would meet in Little Anderson, they would meet in Anderson, the Mound State Park, because the mounds were sacred, and they would actually take their most sacred dead to bury there, and it's lined up lunar and stars and all this really spiritual stuff, and they would have these meetings. And there was no war allowed during the times of these meetings or anything like that. So tribes from all across the country would meet in Indiana, the crossroads of America, right? Isn't that its nickname?
Yeah.
And they didn't have a common language. But one of the words that stuck was the Algonquin word Pukwudgie.
Oh, wow.
And so all these different tribes used the word Pukwudgie, but it all stemmed from them meeting in this little town in Indiana.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice little aside. I like that.
Yeah. So it was really worth driving to Indiana.
Well, I know. Well, hashtag go see his GoFundMe. He's trying to get back to Anderson. Did you get to go there?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, and had an experience while in the park.
That's right, you said that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So back to Florida.
Yes.
When I moved here, obviously I know a lot of the stuff, and I've done a ton of research and different things. And one of my things, I love the urban legend part of what we do. That's why I'm really enjoying being here tonight talking to you. But this right here, I had no idea that the circus or any of that existed.
Yeah.
Lauren said she did. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And even, I would never picture Sarasota. Mm-hmm. I would picture, a big city like Miami, Tampa, Orlando, something big. So how did this, how does the circus kind of
Can I interject something really quick?
No. Me and Crystal. No.
Oh, you're here. I forgot you were here.
No, just about the circus in Sarasota area. There is a town called Gibsontown who has the highest population of little people.
Don't they call them Carneytown? No, that's something different.
It's called Gibsontown, but it actually has the highest population of little people in the entire country because of the circus. Because there was a lot of little people in the circus, and then they retired, whatever, and so actually, if you go to Gibsontown, Florida, which is between Sarasota and St. Petersburg, I don't know exactly where it is, but
I think it kind of goes like Sarasota, Allentown, Bradenton, Gibsonton.
It's
so,
up in
there. It's that area, yeah.
But it's funny because if you go into the post office or the stores and stuff like that, the counters are very low to accommodate the little people, and an interesting place. I've never been there, but I just think that's kind of a...
And what you find is that circus influences the hauntings, right? Mm-hmm. So you have something, and I think all of these are in the book. You have the mini lights, for example. Mm-hmm. And some people believe the mini lights, which is this case of these ogres protecting a witch, or they're just ghost lights that are at that level. But the original story was kind of these ogres. People trace it back to potentially being about circus people, that she was a retired person. She had these two, shorter people from the circus involved in what's going on, and they were living with her and they would protect her. And that's where the story of the mini lights, these small ogre looking things that would chase you if you approached her town, if you approached her little hut, her little cottage. That's part of the reason why people believe that story exists. Right? You've got something to say. You're looking eagerly.
I don't. I'm just really interested.
And then if you take a step back even further from that, it's a story about racial tension in St. Pete.
Okay.
And so these mini lights, which people have seen for years, right? It goes in cycles. The story comes up and then the story disappears and the story comes up. So you have grandparents who know the story, and then you've got parents who know the story and kids know the story. And it's really a story that's all about don't go out after dark. Right? And the original aspect of the story, if you trace it back, was because these kids, these African-American kids, were being abducted from neighborhoods in St. Pete in the 30s and 40s and being sold to alligator farms. And they would become workers for these alligator farms.
I'm glad you said workers, Chris, because you'd be scared.
I know. I was getting no,
it's worse. It's worse.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you can categorize it as worse, but these kids were made to feed the alligators, and if we lost a few along the way, that would be okay because they were only little black kids.
When you said that, I was thinking they were food for alligators.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh.
Yeah, it was go feed the alligators.
Oh, wow.
And if they happen to take you with it, whatever, we've got more we can take.
Wow.
And so whether or not that was really happening, now there are advertisements that actually show little black children, cartoon versions of little black children inside the mouths of alligators advertising these farms. And there are advertisements, I'm not sure if it's in the book because I know it was Mark's picture, but of almost like the Copper Tone ad with Jodie Foster's bikini, bathing suit getting pulled. That's the same kind of thing, but it's an alligator essentially taking a bite out of an African American little kid.
Wow.
And so this was a very real fear, and that their kids were going to be taken for this. Well, then fast forward a few more years, and you have the story of Echo and Echo, who in, I want to say Virginia, were working the fields, right? Around the same time period, maybe in the 60s. I can't remember the exact time. And a van that was a carnival worker just happened to be driving by and saw these two albino African-American kids working in the field, little kids, 5 or 6, abducted them. Put them on display for a decade as being from Mars or being from the darkest forests of Africa because they were so unique looking, because they were black, but they were albino. So they had black features and they were advertised as being aliens, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
They eventually, they go back to Virginia after being passed off, ended up in Ringling, right? They go back to Virginia. The mom, now 10 years has passed. The mom looks, those are my kids. And she has to fight to get her kids back from Ringling because they've abducted them years ago, but they've, the kids don't even remember their past. They don't even remember their mother.
Yeah.
Gets the kids back. All of a sudden, the story of the mini lights comes back into popularity. Why? They physically look like these ogres, other than their height, that these ogres are protecting. They're pale-skinned, weird features. I mean, if you're seeing an albino African-American and you are of ignorant mindset, it looks like a monster coming at you.
Well, especially going back then because there wasn't so much education on it.
Right. And so what I was able to find is when the story resurfaces, right, the story of the mini lights resurfaces is when Eco and Echo come back to Florida essentially to sue Ringling for back pay. Around that same time, the mini light story explodes again.
Comes again, yeah.
Right? And it's a realistic. So I talked to a sociologist of African American history, Afro-American history and sociology in, I think, South Carolina. And I asked him, here's the story of the mini lights. And I showed him the chapter as I was working on it. Like, do you think? He's like, it's very realistic that people would have been uber aware, because they were uber aware in Virginia. There were stories of don't let your kids out because the circus will come and get them. That kids were actually being abducted, or there was a fear that kids would be abducted and be forced to join the circus. And then you would lose them. So if you mix that with the fact that Ringling is such a presence in the area, and that's why the story of the mini lights, which is if you go to any of these 3 locations in St. Pete and you say mini lights, come out tonight. Mini lights, come out tonight. Mini lights, come out tonight. These figures will appear and chase you around, and they can actually drag you down into the sewers, and you'll be lost forever.
Wow.
And it's interesting because I'm not sure if you guys are fans of Florida Men on Florida Man. That's another podcast. They actually recently did an episode about the mini lights.
Did they?
And yeah, and it's a really hard story to tell. So my daughter wants me to tell this event I'm coming up. I'm like, you can't tell the story because there's no straight line. They took one straight line with it, which are actually stories of kids who were abducted and ended up showing up a few days later or whatever in that area. So it's really this story of kids being taken from that neighborhood. And so you find that not only because it's such a good warning, that this ghost story, because people are now seeing them as just orbs of light that fly across the pathway of, or the distance between someplace dark and where you are on the bridge. These orbs that chase after you and then try to run you down, and you just have to run away from them. That it comes up all the time when there's racial tension going on in St. Pete. And so the most recent explosion came when they built Tropicana Field. And what they did when they built Tropicana Field is they essentially, which is what they do with all stadiums, right? They take an area of depressed real estate, which is the bad section of town, and they plop the stadium down. Well, in doing that, they displaced all of these people from that area. And then what do you do once you do that? You have gentrification. Now you've got to own all these different restaurants. And so you close down the restaurant that's been there for 20 years and you put in a McDonald's or you put in a Chili's, because people don't want to go to a local restaurant. They want to go to Chili's when they go to the game because they're familiar with it. And the neighborhood pushes out and pushes out and pushes out. And as it was doing that, the story of the mini lights became popular again, because once again, it was someone encroaching on our area, on our neighborhood, and this story of be careful because they're out there trying to get you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you find Ringling kind of has, and the circus has this effect, or has this kind of cloud over a lot of these stories, because it was such a driving economic force in Southwest Florida or Western Florida.
Yeah, and when it traveled, one thing I found, and this is not necessarily in your book, but I know about circus because I read a lot when they were talking about it was going to close down and it was not traveling anymore when it shut down. I think it was 2 years ago. It was recent. It wasn't long ago. A year ago, 2 years ago. Yeah,
it was recent enough that I had already covered the mini lights, and so I was posting that.
Yeah, so I mean, I looked into it stuff, but I didn't realize a lot of the circus wasn't necessarily. I mean, they had the animals, but a lot of it was, like you said, they look like aliens. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were just people with deformities.
Deformities, yeah.
And the people would pay to see that. I mean, it was almost like they were animals.
Yeah.
So instead of going and seeing the elephants and the tigers, these people became more popular.
Even if you look at a movie like Freaks, which is considered like one of the greatest horror movies, that's ridiculously insensitive. It's a horrible movie in that sense because it's exploitation of it, and it exploits our fears of the deformed and of the unusual.
Exactly, because it's so rare, it's different. So people don't like different.
And so when Ringling came, this is me transitioning into ghost story time. So when Ringling came, people were scared. People didn't want circus folk in their town. You know, in Sarasota, even then, was schwanky, right? Yeah. And Ringling had an amazing idea. Business genius. And it said that what he did was he paid all of his employees in $2 bills. So that at the end of the night, when people were cashing out their register, they would see all the $2 bills that were in the register, and they would be like, wow, Ringling is really good for the economy. And so that's one of the legends that exists. So the very first legend trip I ever did was a little bit south of Sarasota in Venice, which was also prime carnival, circus, real estate, was this idea that every fall Ringling would come back to Florida, come back to Southwest Florida to winter. And he always did it on Halloween night, which, by the way, is not true, but that's the legend. They would roll in the trains.
Sexy.
Exactly. Roll in the trains on Halloween night. And you would, people would actually, once they become popular and people liked them, people were happy about it, people would rush to the Venice train depot to watch the carnival trains and the circus trains come in, and they would cheer, and you would hear the roars, and they would toot the engine, toot, toot, and they would come in, and it was a big festival almost every night. There was a big celebration when they would come in every Halloween night. And so it said that if you go to the Venice train depot at midnight on Halloween, you'll hear the train whistle coming in. You might actually see the ghost train. The tracks end, right? So they don't extend out anymore. It's almost like a train museum now.
Okay.
But the original tracks are still there and then kind of end before the highway. That you'll actually hear the lions and the animals, and you might even be able to hear the crowd. Mm-hmm. And so the very first legend trip we did, we were talking about hashtag follow the signs. I've always wanted to, since Kim Cool wrote about this in her book, I always wanted to experience that, but it was never right. And it just happened to be, it was a Monday night. Not only did I not have my kids, I was divorced by then. Not only did I not have my kids, but Natalie, who was my co-host, she wasn't even my co-host at the time, also didn't have her kids. And I was like, let's go out and do this. And I was rolling over in my mind, and I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? And then I'm doing concessions at a junior high Halloween dance on the Friday. So Halloween's on the Monday. This is a Friday night. We're doing a Halloween dance. By the way, the only dance while I was at that school that I didn't DJ. So I've never even thought about that, but usually I was the DJ of the dance. This time I was running concessions and someone else was DJing. Kid walks up, gets a soda and a chips, pays me with 3 $2 bills. And I'm like, there's my
sign.
Go. There's my
go.
sign. And that's the birth of Tripping on Legends right in that moment.
Follow the signs.
Yep. And so we went there, we laid the $2 bills on the track, and that very first night, we didn't have anything with us. It was literally just the shirts on our back, and actually she took my sweatshirt. And we heard the engines. We heard the whistle of the train coming in at exactly midnight. Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
So that was like the first Ringling, and that was.
That's going to be it for tonight. I think we're going to have a part 2, so make sure you tune in tomorrow for the rest.
Tune in tomorrow for the rest. We're going to actually get into more ghost stories and stories from the book, Haunted Love Stories. And again, if you'd like to support the show, please subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Paradise After Dark podcast.
Check out our Etsy store for some awesome Paradise After Dark gear. I think we got some new long sleeve shirts.
Yes, we got some long sleeve
Now's
shirts. Make sure to follow us on social media at Paradise After Dark Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and at Paradise Dark 239 on Twitter.
Yes, please do, because Lauren is good at following up with everyone. And if you want to, you can email us at paradiseafterdarkpodcast@gmail.com.
Please, please, please make sure to subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening, and rate and review. This really helps us branch out and reach a wider audience.
My subliminal hints. And thank you, everyone, to listening.
Everyone to listening?
Oh, sorry. I didn't want you spoiled. You have to edit that. And thank you, everyone, for listening
To Paradise After Dark.
Dark.